Hey guys, Dr. Julie Two Moon here, and I am of course the doctor that guides the program that I call Thriving Health, where we really dive into what's happening at the cell and what creates the dysfunction in the body, and we repair the root cause rather than chasing symptoms. And one big topic is sleep. Right? We know we need to sleep. None of us is confused on the topic of do I need to sleep or not, and do I need good quality sleep or not. But the reality is that a lot of the information on sleep out there is really, really bad. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about sleep. Yesterday I made a post that was about melatonin, and a lot of you have said, like, look, I get really bad responses from melatonin, and there's a reason for that. If you can hear the thunder, sorry, there's a storm going on. But melatonin is highly promoted as a sleep assistant. And the reality is that melatonin as a hormone is produced under stress in our bodies. It is produced when our body gets stress from darkness. Now, there's another caveat to that natural light does not create that stress, but artificial light exacerbates it. So the whole blue light from your devices is also exacerbating. It actually increases melatonin production. Now, why do we care about not taking melatonin? Like, what's the thing there? So here's the deal. When you add melatonin to the body, you're circumventing body rhythm. And when you do so, melatonin has been studied. This is actual clinical studies that shows that it decreases progesterone, and increases estrogen. Now, estrogen is an anti-thyroid hormone. Estrogen actually impairs thyroid usage at the cell, especially when it's not being adequately regulated and balanced with progesterone in the body. Sorry about the light dark. My camera just doesn't know what to do. And it's so dark outside because of the storm. So when we increase estrogen artificially and aberrantly in the body, we actually block thyroid hormone usage at the cell. This is a very big deal because if you look at my other videos on energy and cell function, you're going to find that normal cell energy is dictated by cell response to thyroid, which means that if you're blocking cell response to thyroid, which high estrogen does, then you're resulting in a stress-based metabolic function, which is then dependent on cortisol. And cortisol, stress-based metabolic function, then also produces a state where the cells are going to produce high amounts of nitric oxide. They're going to produce high amounts of ammonia. And guess what? You're going to trigger that whole estrogen cycle again. So supplementing with melatonin is going to mean that you're going to lower progesterone, which is pro-thyroid and pro-energy balance and pro-body balance in general on the hormonal scale, and you're going to raise estrogen and you're going to block thyroid function. Whereas a good sleep cycle is dependent on actually the cells being in a high energy state. I know that sounds weird because a lot of people will say, well, I'm exhausted and I have sleep problems. And that is part of the problem. Because you're exhausted, which means your cells can't produce enough actual energy. They can't send signals. A lot of times it means they aren't even absorbing nutrients. And that is resulting in lowered hormonal function overall. And that is also impacting your sleep cycle. So the way to remedy a sleep cycle is to repair the cell energy function. Now, a lot of people will also advocate that you have to, moderate other hormones like serotonin and GABA. But another secret about GABA is that you can't regulate GABA until you raise cell energy function, which is why a lot of people might take herbs like valerian, which has a strong impact on GABA. And then they say, well, now I'm so frustrated because it doesn't do anything. And they said it was going to calm me. It was going to produce this relaxation response. But the reality is it can't do that because your cells can't support the energy function of a high enough level to support proper GABA functioning in the brain. So in order to repair a sleep cycle, you have to first deal with the thing that's behind the aberrant sleep cycle, which is your cells don't have enough energy. They can't produce energy in order to create proper hormonal signaling, in order to create proper brain function, in order to do all the restorative functions. And there's a number of organs involved at this point. So on one hand, there's always a liver component because the liver needs to be able to store enough glycogen to be able to convert enough T4 to T3 at night in order to keep your blood sugar stable as well, to keep you asleep. Guess what happens? The liver doesn't have the capacity to store enough glycogen because of stress patterns impacting liver cell function. You're not going to store enough glycogen. Guess what happens? At night, your blood sugar is going to drop. Then what happens? Your cortisol rises. So your cortisol rises at night because your body can't maintain cell energy and the liver can't maintain glycogen stores. And guess what happens? When the cortisol rises, you wake up. And so that's one facet, right? Now, if the liver can't store enough glycogen, you can't convert T4 to T3, guess what happens? If the thyroid, which nighttime is your thyroid's biggest, most robust time, just remember that. If you can't convert T4 to T3 at night and the thyroid function drops, guess what happens? Cortisol rises and you wake up. But a lot of people, again, will go about this like, oh, then I got to deal with the cortisol problem. And again, the unfortunate truth is the cortisol is only rising because the cell energy picture is so low that the thyroid can't do its job and you're getting an aberrant response. So reality is it's not a problem to address via cortisol. It's a problem to address via cell energy. Now, cell energy is then dictated by the cell's ability to take in and use glucose for fuel, which is why if you really want to repair this, you have to be eating carbohydrates and you have to find the right balance that goes for your body. This is something I do with my clients because there's a lot of different constitution types. There's a lot of factors that go in here, but carbohydrates are going to be essential. You also have to have the right balance of protein and fat. So some constitution types are going to require more protein and some are going to require less. This is another facet. So some people find if they eat heavy protein meals at night, the problem is that especially flesh proteins contain a lot of tryptophan. Tryptophan triggers serotonin production, but serotonin is also anti-sleep. So when we trigger serotonin production, we actually are going to hinder our sleep cycle. So there's a varying degree there as well. The other facet is you have to repair the cell energy body-wide, and you have to heal and support the liver. Now, this is not detox, and I'm not talking about taking, dandelion or these other liver herbs, because a lot of them are actually rather harsh and they actually push the liver. They don't restore its function. So we have to restore liver function. So some of the ways that we do that are we actually take tasks off our plate, because the liver is the taskmaster organ. We also then, there goes again, balancing the protein, fats, carbohydrates, making sure that there's plenty of carbohydrates there in order to function so that the liver can store the glycogen so it can run all of its high energy activities. We also need to make sure that we nourish the blood. So this is a Chinese medicine principle. If your blood is deficient, which most women, it really is, like over 40, even if not earlier, blood is deficient because of monthly cycles, because of childbirth. Those are two big ones. So we have to nourish the blood. You've heard me talk before about things like liver also really can be really essential. But again, also different constitution types need different amounts. But in general, liver's a very nourishing food. That may mean for certain bodies too that we need to make sure that there is red meat in the picture, at least on occasion, because it is a very blood nourishing food as well. We may need to use blood nourishing herbs, but those are the food principles that you can certainly use. You also do need to get natural light, so less of the artificial light. If you spend your whole life indoors, you're going to have to make sure you get outside actual sun exposure, and you want sun exposure on your actual skin without sunscreen. So you do not want to coat your body in sunscreen and impair the light absorption at the skin cells, because the light absorption at the skin cells makes an impact with mitochondrial function, which helps raise the cell energy picture, especially if you have those carbohydrates in place, and especially if you're nourishing that liver and you're nourishing that blood, then you're going to get cell energy function to raise. Now, when cell energy function raises as a result of that natural light exposure, you're also helping balance the hormonal picture. So it's a big part of that too. Now, you also are going to need to keep your body temperature high. So the other thing melatonin does is it lowers body temperature, whereas a high body temperature is synonymous with high cell energy and balance in the body, which is why I put a link in the comment under the melatonin post to watch my other video, or you could search in the group for body temperature, because body temperature is a huge facet here. And I see people all the time, body temperatures in the 97s, even the 96s. And you guys, you can't run a single process in your body from that place. So body temperature needs to come up. It needs to get up and stay in the 98.6 to 99 range. And you need to have a pulse rate that's in the 72 to 85 5 range, depends on the person's. We really look at that because those are telling that the cell can maintain energy production, temperature can stay high enough to then regulate proper organ function, enzyme function, maintenance of glucose levels. See how it all ties together? This is why so many people have major sleep problems, because people are trying to sedate them, which is great. I mean, that's why, also just FYI, drugs like Ambien, you guys, they mimic sleep, but they do not give you sleep. So they're a huge problem because they're never letting you actually enter the true restorative sleep state. They're letting the body pretend in a way. So you never do the work that's required behind the scenes. But sleep problems are always predicated out of a low cell energy picture and a low hormonal function of the cell, and cells that cannot use their resources, glucose, minerals, vitamins, and a body that doesn't have enough blood balance, and a liver that can't maintain proper liver balance. And if you don't address it as those aspects, you're always going to fall short. You're going to have to keep medicating and medicating and medicating. Now, to bring that balance back, we need to make sure, like I said, that you're eating enough. You need to eat mineral-rich foods. You need to eat essential carbohydrates at every single meal. And for some people, that may mean even adding, high amounts of carbohydrates. For some people, and this has been true more than once, it may even mean using things like sugar and maple syrup appropriately balanced with your foods. You need to have natural light exposure. You need to have your skin exposed to that light, not just your eyes. You need to diminish your blue light exposure at night. And you need to raise your body temperature. And if those things happen, then sleep will come. But those are the pathways to get there. And like I said, melatonin is anti that because it lowers progesterone and raises estrogen, so it blocks cell energy, which also blocks thyroid. It also lowers body temperature, hence also confirmation it's blocking thyroid. And it creates another stress pattern in the body. And so that's why it's not something I would ever recommend. In fact, I think it's been a real disservice in the medical community to put that out there. Now people will say, oh, it's an antioxidant, but reality is it's also a pro-oxidant. So there's a lot of antioxidants that have pro-oxidative effects if you really look at how they function, and using something that's going to create more stress in that way. Anytime you create metabolic stress, you've just done the opposite of health. So I hope you guys can see, and I really wanted to make sure you understood how that sleep function works and how to go about healing it. Now, as you can see, like this could have different pathways for each person. I find everybody with a low temperature, you've got a cell energy problem, you've got a cell thyroid response problem too. But you also need to be able to understand, how do those patterns interact? Because there can be liver related to spleen, or liver related to spleen and kidney, or maybe it's heart and spleen. And so we need to address that. And so that's why when I work with people, nobody gets the same plan. Everybody's working on a different basis because the patterns that predicate the problem need to be addressed for each individual. You can't just slap a Band-Aid on it and, use some sedative and call it good. You actually have to reasonably understand what is the root cause, how are the cell pictures throughout the body being affected, and how do we remedy that. And that's the only way you achieve that balance. That's why throwing progesterone at the problem, or throwing even thyroid at the problem, is not a wise thing, because progesterone and thyroid both require cells that have high energy profiles that can therefore sustain a high energy state of function. There's a video in the group too on progesterone that you may want to look at to understand that. But that's the key. So that's why with my clients, we go in depth, we evaluate what's really happening, and then we put in place a plan that's specific for the patterns in their body. So we not only remedy the sleep, but we remedy that core issue that's behind it, which is the low cell energy picture, so that we can actually restore the body as a whole and address the problem, not the symptom. And that's what I want to encourage you guys to start thinking. Switch your mind from symptom to addressing the problem, because a lot of what's out there, you go into a health food store, a lot of those supplements are to address the symptom. They're not addressing the problem. And as you can see with something like melatonin, you address the symptom and you can actually make a lot of problems much worse in the background. So if you really want to address the root problem, send me a message. Let's see what's possible. Let's see what's going on. But I want you to understand how to start thinking about it and how to start to take proactive steps to protect your health and protect your body by addressing roots, not symptoms. All right, guys, blessings.